The moon hung high as Victoria Clark, director of the FBI, walked out of the restaurant where she'd had dinner with colleagues. The parking lot, almost empty, held only a few silent headlights. Heading toward her black Mercedes-Benz, she caught the low rumble of a squad car easing closer. Agent Derek Lawson climbed out first. Hand on his holster, he greeted her in a forced, friendly tone. 2 steps back, Brian Stokes kept his gaze locked on her. "Evening. What are you doing out here so late?" Lawson asked, letting his flashlight beam glide from the pavement up to Victoria's face. At 45, with 2 decades in the game, she saw the script coming. "I'm heading to my car, just finished dinner," she said, pointing at the glowing sign. Lawson frowned at the shiny sedan. "That Mercedes yours?" Skepticism hung in the air. "Before we go on, hit subscribe and tap the bell so every new chapter lands right on time and you don't miss a thing." "Yes, sir." The reply was steady, though indignation buzzed beneath it. "I need to see your ID," the cop insisted, as if luxury didn't fit the person he saw. Victoria opened her purse, pulled out her wallet, and handed over her driver's license along with her federal credential. Lawson studied the cards, let out a short laugh, and shared a look with Stokes. "Federal credential, huh?" She tried to explain her position but didn't get far. Stokes stepped in, voice rough. "Ma'am, quiet." The parking lot held its breath. Any move from here would decide who was really in charge. "Hands on your head." Lawson's order sliced the air before Victoria could finish. Even while obeying, she felt the flashlight rake over her, searching for guilt that wasn't there. The click of the cuffs, tighter than necessary, turned cooperation into humiliation. "Run my credentials, it'll take seconds," she said firmly. The answer was a shove toward the cruiser. Outside, onlookers gathered, phones raised, turning the scene into a show. Up front, Lawson and Stokes talked loud like she wasn't even there. "FBI, fancy car, rehearsed story. We've seen this act," one mocked. "Robbery or scam, whatever," the other laughed. Victoria closed her eyes, not to escape but to line up her thoughts. She remembered every time she'd called out abuse of power and how a badge alone never cracked old habits. Now the proof of that failure clamped around her wrists. The engine roared, carving through the night with the siren kept low. The windows reflected stares that judged without context. She sat straight, silent, ticking off witnesses, broken protocols, pieces of a case that would start before they even hit the station. With every corner, she grew more certain this arrest wouldn't end here. It was just the spark for something bigger. Bluish station lights rose on the horizon, along with the certainty that the night would rewrite 2 agents' careers. In the back seat, Victoria held the poise of someone who knows the law's gears from the inside and understood a screw-up this big could finally make the system grind in public. When Lawson parked, bragging about his collar, he had no clue he'd just opened a pit under his own feet. Inside, the station smelled of routine. Worn halls, pale neon, bureaucracy in slow motion. The jingle of Victoria's cuffs echoed, drawing quick glances from bored cops. Stokes pointed her to the 3rd interrogation room, where cold metal met gray walls. Overhead, a camera blinked, recording it all. Lawson sat across from her, wearing a smile that mistook arrogance for confidence. He wanted to know whose car it was, where the badge came from. Victoria answered with surgical calm. She was Victoria Clark, FBI director, and this whole procedure was illegal. She warned about consequences and suggested they verify her info right now. Stokes huffed, decided to run her name, sure the system would back him up. He didn't realize that by typing he'd started the countdown to his own downfall. The camera kept rolling. Outside, the early hours seemed to wait for the exact moment truth would walk through those doors. "Then prove you're somebody," Lawson challenged, voice cold. "With pleasure," Victoria shot back, lifting her chin. "And I suggest you hurry." Stokes rushed out, leaving her under Lawson's wary stare. "You know the penalty for pretending to be a federal agent?" He leaned in. "I know every line of the penal code, officer. Maybe better than you." Silence weighed heavier than the cuffs. Victoria's steady posture eroded Lawson's certainty until the door burst open. Stokes reappeared, ash-faced. "Derek, we need to talk, now." Called outside, Lawson vanished down the hall. Muffled murmurs turned into an argument until both men returned with a captain in a spotless uniform, face torn between anger and panic. "Director Clark," Michael Reynolds announced, voice shaky. "Please accept our sincere apologies." He unlocked the cuffs with nervous fingers. "Apologies." Victoria rubbed her wrists, each word sharp. This wasn't a mistake. It was institutional prejudice and abuse of authority. Before we go on, hit subscribe and tap the bell so every new chapter lands right on time and you don't miss a thing. The two detectives froze by the door. Lawson's eyes went wide. Stokes dabbed the sweat from his collar. "Director, we had no idea." Lawson stammered. "Exactly," she cut in, now in command. "You didn't know because you couldn't be bothered to confirm who I was before putting me on display and treating me like a criminal. That mistake is going to cost you, and not just you too." Captain Reynolds ran a handkerchief over his forehead, wiping away the sweat, and his own unease. "Those officers will be punished, Director Clark, I promise." Her reply came firm. "Empty promises don't work for me, Captain. What happened tonight is a sign of something much bigger." Victoria stood. Her straight posture said it all. Her gaze landed on the two cops who, under pressure, looked ready to melt into the wall. "Answer me. If I didn't hold this position, if I were just a black woman with no voice and no influence, what would have happened to me?" Silence settled in as proof. No one dared fill the heavy void in the room. "That's what we need to talk about," she went on. "Not just the mistake made with me, but what happens every day to people with no protection." Reynolds dropped his eyes. The handkerchief now felt useless. "Director Clark, how do we fix this?" She stepped forward, her voice low but undeniable. "Apologies or internal memos won't cut it. This precinct, this city, this country need real change, and you've just handed me the perfect stage to demand every single one of them." From the hallway, whispers had already started. Cameras were rolling. The incident had stopped being local and now had the fuel to ignite debates far beyond these walls, a spark ready to expose the system in broad daylight. When dawn broke, giant screens flashed. FBI director detained without cause. Within minutes, the arrest video, shot by a passerby, took over social media. In Mayor Jonathan Whitaker's office, protocol turned to chaos. Aides rushed with folders, phones rang non-stop, and the mayor looked years older. "Two beat cops just sabotaged the whole administration," he shouted, slamming the desk. The door opened. "Director Clark is here," the secretary announced. Victoria walked in with a firm step. Dark suit, focused gaze. Two FBI aides stayed one pace behind. "Director," Whitaker began, adjusting his tone, "I want to—" "Save it, Mayor. I'm here to solve problems, not hear excuses." She took the head of the table. The screens lit up with reports and a tense silence spread. "Suspending Lawson and Stokes isn't enough," she said, locking eyes with Police Chief David Foster. "We need to rebuild trust, not churn out empty press releases." David Foster straightened his tie. "The internal investigation is already underway. Total transparency, revised protocols, and immediate retraining. Until the culture changes, every squad car is a calculated risk." Victoria finished. The mayor took a deep breath, feeling the political clock tick faster than ever. Victoria entered the conference room and raised an eyebrow, silencing the table. "Internal investigation?" she repeated. "The FBI is taking over this case now. It's not just about two officers. The entire culture of the department has to change." The statement hung heavy. Every look reflected surprise and fear, as if an institutional earthquake had just begun. Someone finally asked, "What do you expect from us, Director?" She held up 3 fingers. First, a full review of protocols with a ban on racial profiling. Second, mandatory bias training for every officer. Third, an independent citizen commission to oversee complaints. The mayor and the police chief exchanged a tense glance. The mayor cleared his throat. Director Clark rolling all of this out at once would be exactly what's going to happen. She cut him off. "This isn't a suggestion. The Department of Justice will monitor every step and none of it will be hidden. Before we move on, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so every new chapter lands right on time and nothing in this journey slips by." Outside, protesters shouted. Signs with Victoria's face warned, "If it happened to her, it can happen to us." She looked out at the square, let the murmur in, and turned back to the mayor. "Public opinion is with me, and more importantly, so is the law." Whitaker let out the breath he'd been holding. No one moved, waiting for the next move. Director Clark adjusted her jacket while the mayor, visibly tense, tried to delay the inevitable. "Your proposals will be adopted, but I need a few days to get things in order," he muttered. "In 7 days, I want a detailed plan on my desk. Until then, Lawson and Stokes stay off the streets." She cut him off, already rising. In the hallways, aides bumped into cameras and microphones coming from every direction. Flashes popped like little thunderclaps when Clark stepped into the doorway. What's going to happen to the agents who made the stop? Will the FBI change its cooperation protocols? Could this case shake the entire system? Clark kept her tone steady without raising her voice. "What happened to me isn't an exception. It's routine for people without a federal badge or in the spotlight. The fight isn't about my biography, but about the dignity of thousands who suffer discrimination and abuse of power. Let's turn tonight into fuel for reforming institutions." Outside, the City Hall steps were packed. When she walked through the door, waves of applause bounced off the historic walls. In that moment, Clark was no longer just the FBI director. She became a beacon of hope, and every lens captured the exact second a spark threatened to ignite broader change. 6 months separate Victoria Clark's arrest from that morning when the nation held its breath. The courtroom buzzed. Cameras, notepads, and activists' signs jostled for space. In the defendant's dock, Derek Lawson and Brian Stokes stared at the floor as Judge Wells raised his gavel. "All rise for sentencing." They stood, weighed down by tampered recordings, inconsistent reports, and testimonies that dismantled the defense. "This court finds you guilty of abuse of power, unlawful detention, and violation of civil rights," Wells proclaimed. "You are also barred from serving in any law enforcement capacity nationwide." The sharp strike echoed as a warning to those who confuse authority with impunity. The judge added, "When those sworn to uphold the law break it, public trust collapses. Today we remind everyone that no badge is above the law." Before we continue, click subscribe and hit the bell. That way every new chapter reaches you right on time and none of this journey goes unnoticed. In the back row, Victoria chose to remain anonymous. She wasn't after revenge, but structural change. At the door, microphones turned toward the new voice in the security debate. "Director Clark, what's changed in these 6 months?" 27 departments have adopted revised stop-and-frisk protocols, she answered. "Congress is debating oversight legislation named after me, and over 10,000 agents have undergone bias training. But most importantly, the country is talking about it." Her words cut through the crowd, signaling that history was still being written. "If you could relive that night, would you change anything?" the reporter pressed. Victoria looked into the lens. In that moment, she wasn't just answering a question. She was the choked-up voice of those who silently suffered the same injustice. The weight of guilt crushed her. "I would have spoken up sooner," she said, firm, almost in a whisper that carried across the set. The phrase echoed nationwide. Days later, the community leader walked through the gates of the White House. There she witnessed the president sign the Clark Act, which redefined police protocols and created independent oversight bodies. The pen's scratch on paper sounded the spark for a new era of transparency. Next, Geneva hosted her at the Global Civil Rights Summit. Before heads of state, she recounted the incident that marked her journey. The broadcast reached living rooms, cell phones, and public squares, stirring hearts on 5 continents. "A government's measure isn't the comfort it gives the privileged, but the protection it provides the forgotten," she stated. Without raising her voice, but with the conviction of someone who knows that microphones aren't enough. You need a cause. 12 months passed. In a school on the outskirts, the leader found rows of worn desks and restless eyes. A 10-year-old girl, pure determination in her gaze, raised her hand. "I want to tear down unfair laws like you." Victoria knelt to meet the student's eye level. "Rules bend when brave people decide to push them. Never forget, justice isn't a trophy for a few, it's everyone's right." As she left the school gates, Victoria realized that the worst episode of her life had become a turning point for everyone around her. The silence that once hid abuses now broke into firm voices. Neighbors who once bowed down joined neighborhood councils, noted incidents, demanded answers. Institutions once untouchable felt the pressure from these new alliances and could no longer pretend nothing was happening. She had barely crossed the street when her phone buzzed. On the other end, the new police chief reported the completion of the reform package. Body cameras on every uniform, a community board reviewing all complaints, reports made public. Victoria couldn't help but smile. It wasn't a full revolution, but the gears had started turning. There would still be those trying to stall progress, and backslides weren't out of the question. But for the first time in years, she felt the tide turning in justice's favor. It might seem like a small step, but it pointed the way. Now I ask you, how many similar stories remain hidden in your city? Have you ever witnessed or faced discrimination? What did you do in that moment? Share in the comments. Your experience might inspire those still finding their voice. If this story moved you, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to keep up with the next chapters.